as I welcome to the stage in the Alamo Lounge right now, Senator from the great state of Texas, presidential candidate, and the focal point in Washington, D.C. today on repealing and replacing Obamacare and so many other issues that we'll be talking about. Please welcome Senator Ted Cruz, ladies and gentlemen. Senator, come on in. Let me hand you that, Senator. Shaking hands with members of the audience here in our Alamo Lounge. Well, first of all, welcome to KTSA and welcome to the Alamo Lounge. This is your first trip to our radio station and your first trip to the Alamo Lounge, of which I hope there'll be more, but thank you for coming today.
Well, you and I have been talking on radio for a long time, but always on the phone. It's good to do it in person.
Well, you know, and let me just explain how this all came about, because I actually was talking to his dad before him. I'd have many visits with Raphael and then started to talk with the senator. But just a couple of months ago, y'all remember when the Spurs and the Rockets were involved in the series? Remember that? And we were talking about this panel, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, that he put together on health care. And I said, hey, listen, by the way, he's a Houston boy. Don't hold that against him. And I said, hey, listen, Senator, the Rockets and the Spurs are going at it right now. How about this? How about if the Rockets win, let me make sure I get this right. If the Rockets win, you buy, and if the Spurs win, you buy. And the senator said, he stopped for a minute, and he thought about that, and something wasn't right about that, and he said, Trey, Ware, you're on. Just like that. So here he is,
That's
part of this is paying off a bet.
Deal making that really makes Washington operate.
Why don't we have a seat and we'll go through some of these issues and flesh out some of this stuff. Let's start with health care, because obviously that's the big story.
Yeah.
And I have any number of headlines here featuring your name. Let me just go through a couple of the headlines. Ted Cruz Consumer Choice Amendment could save Senate health care bill. Cruz's Obamacare fix gets support from Hill conservatives. Ted Cruz suggests CNN may have broke the law. Healthcare taxes, budget, GOP has big to-do list and little time, and so on and so forth. So you're all over the news. You are the focal point on a lot of these issues that are happening in our government right now, and particularly healthcare. The Cruz Amendment, what is that?
Well, it's part of it's called the Consumer Freedom Amendment, and what it is focused on is giving all of us the freedom to buy the health insurance we want, and it in particular is an effort to bring together conservatives and moderates, and to find a place that the Republican conference can unite on. You look at our Republican majority in the Senate; it's a narrow majority. I mean, we've got 52 Republicans. On Obamacare, every Democrat has made clear they're completely unwilling to work with us. We start out with 48 hard no's, which means we got to get 50 out of 52 Republicans. If we lose 3 Republicans, we're done.
And so far, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, and yourself have already said this is the way it was presented initially is not appealing to you. Well,
that's right. The initial draft, but to be clear, we didn't just say hell no. We said the current draft doesn't get the job done. We need to do it right. And what I've been trying to focus on is really 2 things. Number one, that we have got to honor our promise to repeal Obamacare. We've campaigned for 7 years on that.
How big of a mistake is it if the Republicans don't? 2018's coming, right?
Look, I think it'd be catastrophic. For 7 years, we've told the voters over and over again, if you elect us, the one thing you know about us, if you elect us, we'll repeal Obamacare. I think we look like laughingstocks if we can't get our act together and actually do what we said we would do. But the second issue that I've tried to really focus the discussions on is lowering premiums. The single biggest reason so many people are unhappy, are hurting under Obamacare, is that it's caused premiums to skyrocket. Average families' premiums, they've gone up over $5,000 a year under Obamacare. And so what I've been urging my colleagues is, listen, we've got to focus on lowering premiums. How do you do that? You do that through competition. You do that through more options, more choices. Basic Econ 101. If you want lower prices, you want more choices and more options. If you want higher prices, you want fewer choices and less options. And what does Obamacare do? Fewer choices, less options, and premiums go through the roof.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that brings up an interesting point, one that I have made on my show many times. Callers have made the same point. Does government have to be involved in health care at all? I mean, can we just not let's just try something we've never tried or haven't tried in a long time, the free market. Let it work.
And you are preaching to the choir. And if you and I were doing this solo, as far as I'm concerned, we could write a one-sentence bill, which is Obamacare is repealed, period, the end. But you know what? You and I aren't doing it solo.
Right.
We've got to get a coalition. We've got to get 50 out of 52 Republicans. So we've got to find a way to bring people together. And you know, that's something, going back to the beginning of this year, I've been focused on uniting Republicans to deliver on our promises. So going back to February of this year, I went out to dinner with Lamar Alexander. Now, Lamar, senator from Tennessee, much more moderate Republican, long-time Senate, respected leader there. Lamar and I were having dinner saying, all right, how do we bring together this conference and actually do what we promised? And the two of us together formed a working group where we invited 6 senators to participate. And it was Lamar and myself. It was Mike Lee, Rob Portman, Cory Gardner, and Tom Cotton. And that was by design.
Good group.
It was a terrific group.
Yep.
And it was designed to run the ideological spectrum of the Republican conference, to include strong conservatives, but also to include much more moderate senators. To have geographic diversity. You've got some Medicaid expansion states. You've got non-expansion states. And also the senators who are in it, they're smart, they're hard working, they're willing to roll up their sleeves and actually understand the issue, because this stuff's complicated. If you're just reading 2 or 3 talking points, you can't figure this out. And we met every week just trying to see if we could find common ground, if we could come together. And one of the amazing things, Trey, we met for over a month. There was not a single press story. Nobody leaked. You had 6 senators, all their staff knew about the meetings. Nobody leaked. There's a word for that in Washington. It's called weird.
Yeah. Never happened.
I mean, that doesn't happen, but I think people were in good faith trying to come together and get the job done. Now, when it became clear the House was likely to pass repeal legislation, Lamar and I went to Mitch McConnell, and we sat down and said, Mitch, listen, we need a process in the Senate to try to unify our conference. And so we took our working group, we expanded it, we added a few other senators, we added committee chairs, we added leadership. That larger working group then began meeting twice a week. We had been meeting in my conference room. We moved to a larger room. And that's ultimately what has produced the bill that's moving forward. Now, we're not there yet. We don't have agreement. If we had had agreement, we would have voted on it and passed it if we'd gotten agreement.
Right.
But I think the key to getting agreement is focusing on lowering premiums. And what I've been urging everyone is I said, look, lowering premiums is a win-win. If we're sitting here a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and people are seeing premiums that are materially lower, 10, 20, 30% lower, health care is more affordable, there's more choices, people who are struggling are able to get health insurance for their families, that's a win, and it's a win-win for everyone. It's a win for moderates, it's a win for conservatives, it's a win for the people we're elected to represent.
That's where you and I were talking when we made the deal to come here. One of the issues that came up on this, what'd you call it, consumer amendment?
By the way, I got to ask, is there any way to beat Golden State?
No. Didn't you see they just gave Steph $200 million? You see that?
Bless.
Isn't that crazy money?
They got so many weapons, it's just ridiculous.
It's insane right now.
It's
crazy. Yeah, they have a health care plan, I guess. So one of the things that's in this...
Just rain in threes.
It's right. It's right.
You know, $200 million, that covers a lot of health care.
It sure does. It really does. When it comes down to the consumer choice,
Yep.
Now we like that because... That's not a top-down. That's not the government saying this is the way it's going to be and you will do it this way. That's the consumer saying this is what I want. Now, as I understand the plan, the amendment, the health care companies or the health insurance companies, if they want to offer various programs, okay, fine, you can offer various programs, but you also have to, at least one, Obamacare program as well. So, all this whining and crying and moaning that we're hearing from people, I love my Obamacare. I've never met anybody who said that, by the way, but somehow CNN and ABC finds them, puts them on. I love my Obamacare. Okay, well, if those people are out there, buy all the Obamacare you want, right? But for those of us who actually want a choice to bring down the cost of health care, now you have a choice.
That's exactly right. Part of Obamacare is what's called Title I, and it's a series of 12 mandates of what's got to be included in every insurance policy anyone buys. And that makes politicians real happy because they could say, look at all this stuff we're giving you. We're giving you everything that's mandated to be in an insurance policy.
Right.
The problem is those mandates are a principal driver of premium skyrocketing. And so one of the major issues of contention is a number of the more moderate Republicans want to keep all those mandates, and the conservatives, we want to get rid of all those mandates. So we're going back and forth. And so the Consumer Freedom Amendment was my effort to try to bring everyone together and get a win for everyone. And what it says, as you noted, is if an insurance company sells at least one plan in a state that complies with the mandates, they can also sell any other plan that consumers desire. And so it's not taking away anything. Everything that's in Title I, if you want something with all those mandates, you can buy it.
And that includes employers?
Sure.
Okay.
But if you want something else, you can buy something else. And so we were up in Dallas last night. We did a veterans town hall.
Yeah.
And it was a good discussion, but there were a couple of folks who were criticizing this, and they were more on the liberal side, and they were saying, well, gosh, what about this type of coverage? What about that type of coverage? How come you're getting rid of that? I said, look, we're not getting rid of anything. If you want that kind of coverage, you can buy it. But don't make everybody buy it. And, I told a story from a few years ago. I was up in Odessa doing a small business roundtable, and a gentleman who owns a steakhouse there, he talked to me about his 101-year-old aunt. And he said she'd just had her health insurance canceled. And he said the reason she'd had it canceled is that it didn't cover maternity coverage. And he said, you know what? My 101-year-old aunt is just fine with that. And, when I said at the town hall last night, it's look, why are you forcing this woman who doesn't want maternity coverage to pay for it?
Or, conversely, a young family who is healthy, who needs to buy shoes, maybe put a down payment on a house. Why are you making them buy this exorbitant plan they'll never use?
And giving people more choices. Yes. And what people forget, when you mandate you got to have everything, that makes politicians feel good. Look at all this stuff we're giving you.
Right.
But if the prices are so expensive no one can afford it, there are millions of people. A year ago, 6.5 million people were fined by the IRS under Obamacare for not buying health insurance. Now think about that for a minute.
It's ridiculous.
You're struggling. You don't have the money to buy health insurance. You're trying to make ends meet. So not only do you not get health insurance, the IRS comes along and fines you on top of that. How are you helping these people?
Yeah. Well,
and I'd much rather, you want to help them drive down premiums, so maybe a 30-year-old working person who's just getting started in their career, doesn't have a lot of money, may not have the money to buy a full comprehensive plan that covers everything, but may well want to buy a catastrophic policy. If, God forbid, you get some horrible disease, you get hit by a truck, you want it then, but if you break your arm, you'll deal with those costs and pay for the more minor health care issues. That person is better off if they have something they can afford than right now where they can't afford anything.
So are we making headway on those issues? Is that moving forward? Are you hopeful about that, number one? And number two, and I won't ask you to be a leaker here, but you met with President Trump last week. What did you talk about? What did he tell you about this very issue? What happened?
So I am feeling hopeful. We're not there yet, and it is precarious. The majority is so narrow. I don't know if we get it done or not. I believe there is an agreement to be reached, and what I'm trying to do is bring everyone to the table and figure out ways that we can all get wins that are meaningful for our constituents. And listen, a win for a Lamar Alexander is different than a win for me, and that's all right.
That's how it works.
Yeah, that is our constitutional system.
That works.
In terms of the president, what the president's biggest message is he wants to get this done. He's not getting deep into the weeds of the details of what's in the bill. He wants to get it done, and he's leaning on Republicans to get it done. I'm glad for that.
Well, that's also how it's supposed to work.
And I'm also glad he's actually given the Senate some space. So the White House has not been beating on people in the internal discussions. He's just given us a little bit of space to try to work and come together. I think that was the right call. And if we're going to get it done, that's the best way to get it done, I think.
All right. So let's move on to another topic. We've got only a few minutes here, so I want to jump to as much as we can. Senator Ted Cruz is in the Alamo Lounge. I'm Trey Ware, 550 KTSA FM 1071. Thank you very much to GPS of Texas and to Green Carpet Company, Magnolia Pancake House for putting this all together. I'm sitting here looking at the most foremost authority in my mind on terrorism. Worldwide. Dr. Jeffrey Adicott heads up St. Mary's School of Law Center for Terrorism Law. He wrote the book called Radical Islam, Why? He's a frequent guest on our show. He's an expert like none other on this subject. Terrorism, terror, safety of American citizens in particular, but also those worldwide. How are we doing in the fight? Where do we stand? And what can we be doing better?
Well, I think we're doing much better today than we were a year ago. And this was one of the major issues, I think, that led to the election results in 2016, was frustrations with an administration and a president who would not acknowledge the threat we faced, a president who wouldn't even say the words radical Islamic terrorism. I chaired a hearing on the willful blindness of the Obama administration to radical Islamic terrorism. We had a whistleblower from the Department of Homeland Security who described how DHS had gone through and modified or deleted over 800 records to remove any reference to radical Islam or the Muslim Brotherhood, just to delete them. And it was actually at the direction of the White House, and the White House demanded, this is the White House's word, that they purge the records to remove any reference. Now that's just nuts. I mean that is disconnected, and so you ended up. You remember the Orlando terrorist,
nightclub,
who murdered all these people at this gay nightclub. It was a horrible crime. He called 911, and he pledged his allegiance to al-Baghdadi. He pledged his allegiance to ISIS. They have it on tape. Loretta Lynch, then the Attorney General, releases the tape. She literally edited out the Pledge of Allegiance to ISIS. They just cut it out, erased it. And then she had the audacity to say, we may never know why he did this.
No.
He told us why he did it.
Right.
On tape. And with the new administration, I think there is a seriousness and a clear-eyed focus on the danger of jihadists.
What I keep hearing, and was hearing back then, I haven't heard it since the election, from my listeners and people that I would encounter, Senator, was we're tired of being told don't get mad at Islam. And anytime somebody attacks somebody here in the United States, the first thing the president, at that time Obama, would say was, don't you get mad at Islam. Well, we're not. It's not Islam that we're mad at. We're not mad at Muhammad or the Prophet or anything. We're not mad. What we want to be, though, is safe. And it was clear these were not Southern Baptists or Methodists who were doing this. And the president refused to acknowledge where the root of this and where there's a radical version of that religion. And that's what we need to attend to and pay attention to.
That's exactly right, and there is a distinction. There are millions of peaceful Muslims across the world.
Amen.
Here in America, you look at countries like India, where you have relatively little terrorism. But there's a difference between being Muslim and being an Islamist. Being an Islamist is a political and theological doctrine that commands its adherents to jihad, that commands them to forcibly convert infidels, by which they mean everybody else, or to murder them, and to, through the law, enforce Sharia law on everyone. That's a very different thing. If you want to use force and violence to kill other people, and I'll tell you, Islamists are killing Muslims like crazy. You look at ISIS, you look at these radicals. If you're not a full-fledged Islamist, if you're just a Muslim, they'll happily kill you as well. It is dangerous, and we need to fight it with a serious focus. Now, let me give you a bit of encouragement. You asked how we're doing.
Okay.
Let's look at two different areas. Number one, securing the border. The first 6 months of the new administration, illegal boarding crossings have dropped over 60%. And, I was down a few months ago, down in the border, down in McAllen, and was meeting with Border Patrol agents, and I was asking them, all right, how did this happen? We haven't even built a wall yet. We haven't added new Border Patrol agents. It takes time to put those policies in place. So So what's changed that we've seen this amazing drop? They said, look, the only thing that's changed is the cartels understand we have an administration that will actually enforce the law, and so they're just not coming. Now, can you imagine, Trey, back in September, October, if someone had said, just elect a Republican president who's willing to enforce the law, and that alone will drop illegal immigration by 60%? You'd have been laughed at and ridiculed. People said, that is crazy.
They would have laughed you out of the house.
So
that's right.
That's an example domestically. Now let's talk abroad. Let's talk ISIS. I was talking a few months ago with a senior military commander, a senior general. And I was asking, all right, how are things going with ISIS? And this is where we're just visiting one-on-one. And he said, we're making real progress. ISIS is losing territory. And he was predicting, he said, it could be as soon as fall of this year that ISIS's territory will fall and they will be relegated to the same status as Al-Qaeda. Very dangerous terrorists, but without a nation state behind them, without territory they control. Now, that's a big, big deal. I asked him the same question. I said, all right, what's changed? There hadn't been a whole lot of time for things to change. How can suddenly we be making so much progress? And it was interesting, the general's answer. He said, listen, it's not even the rules of engagement that have changed. They haven't really changed. He said, what's changed is the president has delegated decision-making authority down the chain of command. So he said in the prior administration, the White House was making tactical decisions on the battlefield.
They were micromanaging it.
He said they were literally, Susan Rice was deploying troops. We want 20 here, we want 30 there. He said in the Pentagon they would jokingly refer to her as General Rice. And one of the first things President Trump did is he delegated to the commanders the authority to make battlefield decisions. They, in turn, delegated decisions down. So now, when our troops confront the enemy, they have the authority to engage and defeat them.
Yeah.
And that alone has had a dramatic effect shifting the tide.
All right, so when we come back, I've got a network responsibility. I've got to take a quick break here for a network news and a couple of commercials. But when we get back, we continue our discussion here with Senator Ted Cruz. I want to pick up on that a little bit because as Syria falls, I believe one of the things that President Trump and President Putin will be discussing in the next couple of days will be how to cordon that off, where the lines are going to be drawn. So we'll get into that a little bit. Tax reform, we've got to talk about tax reform, one of your leading planks when you ran for president, the budget, and we'll get a question in also from a representative from the San Antonio Express News. Gilbert Garcia is here. We'll give him a microphone, let him ask you a question too. As we continue in the Alamo Lounge, Senator Ted Cruz is here. Trey Ware, 550 KTSA and FM 1071.
Senator Cruz comes home and goes one-on-one with KTSA's Trey Ware, live from the Alamo Lounge. Presented by GPS of Texas and Green Carpet Company.
And we're back in the Alamo Lounge. Trey Ware on 550 KTSA and FM 1071. Thank you to GPS of Texas, Green Carpet Company, Magnolia Pancake House. We got a great group of folks here, and Senator Ted Cruz is joining us. We spent the first half hour on health care and terrorism, and of course that led into Syria. We have Syria. We have North Korea. We have Russia. We have all this going on right now. Is the world as chaotic as it seems? And in a brief as term as possible, what do we do about Syria and what do we do about North Korea? Where do we go from here?
Well, it is a very dangerous world, and it's getting more dangerous. And you've got different types of threats. Number one, you've got nation states. You've got nations like Russia and China that are serious competitors, that are doing major investments into their military, that are doing major investments into cyber terrorism, that are doing major investments into space and looking at taking down our space architecture. You know, I serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee and then chair the Science and Space Subcommittee of the Commerce Committee. So I am very active in space from both the civilian and the military side. And you think about, for example, how dependent we are on all of our tremendous space technology. One question I ask military commanders all the time, how often are you drilling in a scenario where the space architecture is taken down? The Chinese are investing in technology to take our satellites down. And so if you're piloting an aircraft carrier in the Pacific, what do you do if GPS goes down? Can you pilot by the stars and a compass? You know, if you're flying a fighter jet. What's your ability when you have suddenly no space architecture and communication to figure out where the heck you are and where you're going?
And how to land on that postage stamp nose aircraft carrier.
That is exactly right. And so those threats are significant and growing, and I'm pressing for much greater investments in securing our space assets and the ability to defend them and in defending against cyber terrorism. Those are important, and it's the nation states, it's Russia and China that are major drivers there.
North Korea?
North Korea doesn't have nearly the capacity that Russia and China does, but North Korea is dangerous.
Does this ICBM bother you?
Very much so. And North Korea and Iran are an entirely different category. They're rogue states, and they are unbelievably dangerous. North Korea right now is the most dangerous place on the face of the planet. Kim Jong-un, the dictator, is unstable. He is dangerous. You know, I'm reminded a couple months ago, John McCain referred to Kim Jong-un as that crazy fat kid. And the North Korean press agency went out and condemned McCain and me. And it was a little random. I hadn't said anything. They just said, and Ted Cruz, he's bad too. I was like, what? I'm just sitting here. What did I do? So McCain, to his credit, actually tweeted out, he said, what? I should say that crazy skinny kid?
I'd be a liar.
And so McCain tells this story at our lunch, and I try not to relay what's said at lunch, but I will confess, when he told that story, I pulled my phone out, found his tweet, and immediately retweeted it. I thought that was worth
Do you have any doubt in your mind that he wants to strike the United States, or that he wants to create havoc somewhere, maybe Japan or South Korea?
He certainly wants to create havoc. Look, doubt, I don't know. I mean, I think he is unstable and maybe crazy. He has stated an intention to attack the United States. In fact, a couple of years ago, he listed 3 American cities that he wanted to attack. One of them was Austin, Texas.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And he has nuclear weapons, and they are testing ICBM technology. And we just did this week an additional test, and the only purpose of an ICBM is to carry a nuclear weapon to the United States and murder Americans. And, you know, Trey, it's worth pausing and reflecting on, how did we get here? How did this nutcase actually get nuclear weapons? And you have to go back to the Clinton administration. Clinton administration led the world in relaxing sanctions against North Korea. And we relaxed sanctions, and we did so in exchange for a promise that they wouldn't develop nuclear weapons. And Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un's dad, took the billions of dollars and turned around and developed nuclear weapons with him. He said, thank you very much, and he got nukes, and now we're dealing with a stable and crazy, an unstable and crazy dictator with nuclear weapons. Now, why is that important to focus on it? Well, because the person who was the lead negotiator of that North Korea deal is a woman named Wendy Sherman. Fast forward to the Obama administration, Obama and Hillary Clinton recruited Wendy Sherman back into government to be the lead negotiator with Iran. Now, you think about it.
We're in the same boat.
And she negotiated the exact same deal. You think about it. They found, quite literally, the only person on the planet, out of 7 billion people, the only person who's screwed this up already.
To get her to screw it up
again. And they
again.
brought her in to screw it up again. And she negotiated the same deal. With the Ayatollah Khamenei, we'll give you billions of dollars in exchange for a hollow and empty promise not to develop nukes. And if we don't get serious about Iran, we're going to repeat the exact same mistakes. And as dangerous as North Korea is, if Iran ever gets nukes, it will instantly become much, much more dangerous, because the difference between the two, although Kim Jong-un is completely unstable, it may be possible to have something resembling rational deterrence with him. The Ayatollah Khamenei
they don't
is a religious zealot, who embraces and celebrates death and suicide. That means ordinary cost-benefit analysis may not work with him. And when he, in the middle of negotiating this deal, he would lead mobs in chanting "Death to America." I mean, what does it say? I'm reminded of an editorial cartoon a couple of years ago that had Khamenei saying, "Death to America," and had John Kerry coming back saying, "Can we meet you halfway?"
Yeah. Can I bring James Taylor to sing for you? Now will we?
That really is. You should be joking when you say that.
I know, but I'm not. It's the way that was our response.
It's impossible to satirize the naivete and blindness.
How ridiculous that is. So when it comes to Kim Jong-un...
But you need a friend.
That's right. Kim Jong-un getting a missile that could hit us or a nuclear Iran, will the United States stand for either one of those? Or are we going to insert ourselves in the middle of that and stop it before it happens?
I don't know. President Trump today was sending a pretty stern warning to North Korea.
And so did Nikki Haley yesterday.
I think those messages are important to be heard. It's dangerous. I mean, there are not... When you have someone with nuclear weapons, there are a lot of options in North Korea that within hours result in hundreds of thousands of casualties. I mean, it can escalate. We've got 30,000 troops sitting right there.
That's right.
And, one of the things the administration is doing is moving forward with putting THAAD missile interceptors in South Korea. I think that's a very strong move. It's something I've urged the Obama administration to do for years. I'm glad the Trump administration.
We had nukes there until 91. We made an agreement with them to pull them out. Should we consider putting them in or saying to Japan, you can become nuclear as well? Should we?
Well, I think
those avenues we ought to think
the latter may well happen.
Okay.
And I think Japan,
that'll get China's attention, won't it?
Japan needs to invest more in defense, and Japan is there's a very good chance Japan is the first target, maybe even before South Korea.
I would think so, yeah.
And a second piece is there's no doubt China has enormous influence over North Korea. And some of the early signs are somewhat encouraging that China may be using that influence. Now, it didn't stop the test this week, so
right.
They're not using it much, but there are some indications that China is being helpful. Okay. I'm encouraged by that, but my attitude is very much like Reagan's towards the Soviet Union: trust but verify.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But we'll take as much help as we can get, and if it's in China's interest to do so, they might help. But there aren't many great options when you've got a nutcase with nuclear weapons. That's just a bad situation.
Senator Ted Cruz is with us here in the Alamo Lounge. I'm Trey Ware on KTSA, brought to you by GPS of Texas, Green Carpet Company, and Magnolia Pancake House. Gilbert Garcia from the San Antonio Express News is here. Do you have a microphone, Gilbert? We can get a question from you to the senator. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Trey. Senator Cruz, you talked about your concern about bringing premiums down as far as Obamacare. And one question that's come up regarding your amendment is whether insurers will maybe want to encourage their customers to move toward the simpler, less expensive, non-compliant plans, and that maybe one way of doing that is they might drive up the premiums for the Obamacare compliant plans. What's your response to that?
Yeah, look, that's a very good question, and it's worth discussing how it would operate. So with consumer freedom, you would have plans that meet the Title I mandates, that would have all of the protections on pre-existing conditions and everything else. And then you would have additional plans that people could buy that would probably be slimmed down, wouldn't be covering everything, but might be catastrophic, might be what individuals decide they need. Those would have much lower premiums. And one of the reasonable concerns that's been raised is, well, if you have younger, healthier people buying the less expensive plans, that could drive up the cost of the plans on the exchanges. There are a couple of avenues to prevent that or limit that. One is that the tax subsidies automatically operate in the exchanges. So if the premiums go up, the subsidies are going up as well. Secondly, a significant part of this bill is what's called the stabilization fund, which is tens of billions of dollars that is going to the states directly to stabilize the markets, that could go directly into the exchanges to stabilize premiums there and prevent them from going up. And what it means in practice, look, that there is a relatively small subset of the population with serious illnesses, serious diseases, that there is a significant commitment in Congress to provide very substantial assistance to those individuals. There are two ways to do it. If you've got people who are really sick, whose health care is very expensive. One way to do it is the way Obamacare does it. Now, what Obamacare does is it takes people who are really, really sick, and it forces a ton of other people to cross-subsidize them by jacking up their premiums. So it takes a 28-year-old young woman who's just starting her career, and basically Obamacare says, you know what, we're going to double your premium, not to help you, but because we want to help these people who are really sick over here. I think that's really unfair. Why are you hammering people who are just struggling and just getting started What I'd rather do, and what Consumer Freedom would do, would let that 28-year-old young woman buy a plan much, much cheaper. And then if we're going to subsidize people who are really sick and very expensive, let's do it directly through tax revenue. Let's do it from Warren Buffett's money rather than a 28-year-old young woman who doesn't have money to make ends meet. And so it's a question of how you do it. I think it's unfair to hammer a bunch of people. It's not their fault. It's not that, a young married couple just getting started. It's not their fault. Don't double their insurance. Let their insurance go down and then use tax revenues directly in the exchanges. And essentially they function more as a high-risk pool with revenues to stabilize premiums.
In addition to that, right now, the way the program is working, people are waiting until they get sick before they buy, and so they're automatically going into a catastrophic situation. If you're allowing plans that people want to buy, then the whole price mechanism comes down at that point because more people are in the program now.
That's exactly
more
right.
people are playing.
You want a system where people are encouraged to purchase insurance. Now, what Obamacare does is says the IRS is going to fine you if you don't. What I'd rather do is have a marketplace where there are attractive enough insurance products on the market that people want to purchase them.
Right.
That the prices are affordable. I'll tell a story. A few months ago, you may remember I did on CNN a 2-hour debate with Bernie Sanders
I do remember,
on Obamacare.
Yep.
It was a lot of fun. It featured Bernie at one point saying, "Ted wants everyone to die." But you know what? It was probably the more substance on health care than we had the whole presidential campaign. And afterwards, the next day I went to a restaurant in D.C., was having dinner, and two waitresses who I know well, they both came up to me and they both said, "Ted, we saw the debate last night." And one of them said, "You know what, under Obamacare, my premiums have tripled. They've gone from $400 a month to $1,200 a month." She said, "I can't afford $1,200 a month." She said, "For the first time in my life, I don't have health insurance. And it scares me." Now, and she also said, for the first time, she'd worked at the restaurant for over 10 years, she said, for the first time, the restaurant forcibly reduced her hours to below 30 hours a week. She went to their HR website, and she was capped at 29.99 hours. She couldn't go above it.
Seen a bunch of places do that.
Now, the second waitress, she did have health insurance. She told me she was pregnant at the time. She's since had her baby, a little girl. But she said, look, pregnant, first child, she was really excited. She said she'd just gotten a notification in the mail from her insurance company that the doctor she knows and trusts isn't covered by her plan, and she couldn't have her doctor deliver her baby. They both said, "Ted, please help us get rid of this disaster."
So much for keeping your doctor if you like your doctor.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Those are the people, and actually I tell those stories a lot within the Senate to try to focus people on, look, victory is helping those young ladies, making it easier for them to have health insurance they can afford, that actually makes a difference for them. And if we focus on results, I think that's the best way to move forward.
I got a question from the Trey Ware page at ktsa.com from Steve, who wrote in. You and President Trump, have you mended fences? What's your relationship like, and how's he doing?
Yes. And I will say our relationship is surprisingly good. One of the things we did when the president came in is I sent about a third of my Senate staff to go work in the administration. And a lot of our senior staff did that with my enthusiastic encouragement, because I think personnel is policy, and I wanted to have good people around the table helping make decisions. Right now, I'm talking with the president frequently. My office is talking with the White House and the administration every day, sometimes every hour. And my general rule of thumb in Washington is that I don't comment on tweets. I don't comment on the comment of the day. But I will comment on substance and policy. And on substance and policy, I think the president and the administration are doing pretty well. You look at the cabinet appointments. This is a very strong cabinet. You got a cabinet, it's probably the most conservative cabinet we've seen in decades.
That started with the vice president choice. His pick of vice president,
Mike
strong
Pence
man, right?
is a good and honorable man.
Yeah.
He's someone I like. He's someone I respect. Excellent. And throughout the cabinet.
Yeah.
You look at the regulatory and executive actions have been very, very strong. Things like freezing federal civilian non-military hiring at the outset. Things like a regulatory moratorium for every one new regulation you got to rescind two. Things like ending the taxpayer funding of overseas abortions. Things like pulling out of Paris. Look, pulling out of Paris was a big deal.
Yes, it was.
And he got enormous pressure to stay in that agreement. I'll tell you, I spent a lot of time visiting with President Trump, urging him to pull out. He and I spent probably a half hour on Air Force One with me trying to make the case that we got to pull out, and it's all about jobs. And he did the right thing, and that was not easy. The day after he pulled out of Paris, he called me and said, all right, Ted, what'd you think? And my response, I said, Mr. President, everyone who hates you is pissed at you right now. Mm-hmm. And everyone who loves you is thrilled. And I'll tell you, the president's central message when he did it was he said, I was elected by the people of Pittsburgh and not Paris. And that is exactly right. That Paris deal was hammering jobs of working men and women. And let me mention one other thing, which is Neil Gorsuch. Neil Gorsuch was a home run.
Yes, sir.
And so the role I'm trying to play is I'm trying to do everything I can to encourage the president, to encourage the administration to move in a positive direction and not to move in a negative direction.
We have a couple of minutes left here, so before we have to wrap up, you mentioned Neil Gorsuch just a second ago, one of the topics I wanted to get into with you, and we'll have to do a part 2 to this at some later date, have you come back so we can do some more on this. He was an excellent choice. It looks like he's going to have the opportunity, at least in the next 4 years, to one more or maybe 2 more. You're encouraged, obviously, by Gorsuch. Your name has been tossed around.
Well, look, Trey, I will say it is flattering, it is humbling to be discussed in that context. You know, I've spent a lot of my career litigating before the Supreme Court. It is an institution that's been incredibly important to our nation's history. It's an institution I revere. And it's gone off course. It's gone off course. I will tell you, though, that is not the desire of my heart. And the reason is simple. A principled federal judge stays out of political and policy fights. And if I were ever a judge, that's what I'd do. I'd stay out of political and policy fights. I don't want to stay out of political and policy fights.
Right.
I want to be right in the middle of them, and the proper place to do that is in the Senate. The Senate is the battlefield, and you look at the major issues of the day, Obamacare, tax reform, regulatory reform. What I am trying to do is do everything I can to help lead the fight for us to deliver on what we promised, and I think there's more need in the Senate. I want to be part of confirming 2, 3, 4, 5 strong, principled constitutionalists for the court, but I'll tell you, I don't really want to be one of them.
You don't want to be one of them. There's your answer right there for those of you who wanted to know. Senator, I just wanted to extend a hand and thank you very much for your time this morning and what you're doing in Washington, D.C. The fact that you took time to come be with us here in the Alamo Lounge and speak with these folks says a lot about who you are, and we appreciate all that you do, and thank you for being here. How about a round of applause for Senator Ted Cruz, everybody?